Today, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to Biographia Literaria. George Watson, in his edition of Biographia Literaria, has given a very detailed account of the genesis and publication of this huge monumental work. But I'm not going to go into the details of it since I have already talked briefly in my previous lectures about the genesis of this work, but I'm going to just brush up your knowledge and do a quick recap by saying that the story of Biographia Literaria uh, had begun as a conversation between two friends, and these two friends obviously were Wordsworth and Coleridge, and how both had settled in the Lake District after they returned from Germany. And both of them were debating about what form a second edition of the lyrical ballads should take. And so they thought of the idea of replacing the brief advertisement or introduction which had been prefixed to the first edition by a critical preface. And Wordsworth, many years later, himself admitted that the idea and indeed the whole substance of the preface as he had come to write it were all Coleridge's. So, this is how it had all begun, and by 1815, when Coleridge had come to write Biographia, the preface was Wordsworth's, and Biographia was Coleridge's reply to Wordsworth. But the simplification of it was quite crude, and then there were differences between the two of them, and the attack upon the preface in the Biographia by Coleridge were quite sharp, and they were so sharp that the sharpness of a middleman disagreeing with his youth was one of the comments of a critic. And Wordsworth, who had written the preface, were quite resented these attacks by Coleridge. Now, the form of Biographia Literaria, as it was published, the first part of Biographia Literaria is the philosophical part, that is from chapters 1 to 13. It contained his philosophical and metaphysical theories and their impact on his life. Then he began writing the preface to the book, and it was quite a detailed book, and that formed the second part of Biographia Literaria, which were from chapters 14 to 22. And this part, that is, this second part, examines critically Wordsworth's theory of poetry and poetic diction, and which is of far reaching significance as far as literary theory is concerned. The link between the two parts is the poet's theory of imagination. Coleridge first had intended to call this work Autobiographia Literaria, but he later changed it to Biographia Literaria. There was a kind of a strange mixture of philosophy, literary theory, and biography, but still, the Biographia remains a great world book. According to famous writer Sainsbury, the whole book is among the few which constitute the very Bible of criticism. The greatness and originality of the book arises from the fact that here, for the first time, a synthesis of philosophy and literature has been achieved. Coleridge has based literary criticism on human psychology, and he has used psychology to explain the process of artistic creation. Therefore, the work is a unique landmark in the history of literary criticism. The book is very seminal meaning pivotal or a work of great importance, and it has always been recognized as such, given a lot of respect, and a subject of great research as well. But its very existence as a book, with one notable exception, has been doubted and denied by those best qualified to speak. I quote, design and purpose have been denied, and yet its greatest originality is its design. Not that Coleridge's original plan for the book demands our praise or even our attention. Coleridge had such a plan, but he did not follow it up. He set out to write a book of metaphysics to which he hoped the events of his life would give a continuity. He ended by producing a work of aesthetics to which such narrative as there is has failed to give continuity. But there is another unity, and it is peculiarly Coleridgean. He succeeds for the first and for the last time in English criticism in marrying the twin studies of philosophy and literature, not simply by writing about both within the boards of a single book or by insisting that such a marriage should be, but in discovering a causal link between the two in the century old preoccupation of English critics with the theory of the poet's imagination. So, here was a brief introduction of how the Biographia Literaria came to be written about.